Kay, would you tell us a little bit about the Heritage Foundation and what current heritage projects you are most excited about executing?
Happy to do that. But before I do, a point of personal privilege. I just want to make sure that in front of this particular audience, I take a minute to make sure that they know and understand how much I admire, respect, and indeed love you. This gentleman not only has nurtured you, many of you who've been through the programs, but many of us who have not been through the Leadership Institute programs. He and his wife have played a very important role in my life over these many years. I can't remember when we first met, but it must have been at least 30 years ago.
Easy.
And I can tell you 30 years ago, to be an African-American, pro-life, conservative, evangelical, make the list, was not the easiest thing to do or be. But to have people who would come beside you, walk beside you, guide you, give you the benefit of their counsel and wisdom meant the world. So I have said it often, but I don't know if I've ever said it in your presence, and I don't know if I have said it in front of one of your audiences. So I wanted to take a minute to do that and to thank you publicly for all you've meant in my life.
Thank you.
Now,
Thank you.
And I have to say this, too, before I answer your question. When I came into the movement 30-plus years ago, there were icons of the movement, and there are too few of you left. And so I think I made the decision, and clearly you did as well, is to make sure that we spent a part of our time, energy, and effort replacing ourselves.
Yep.
So I appreciate the work that you've done over the years in terms of growing the next generation of conservative leadership. So thank you for that. I also think it would be appropriate to start today with recognizing the first president that I had the opportunity to work full-time, George Herbert Walker Bush. As I said yesterday, I don't think you can become more establishment than George Herbert Walker Bush. That's with a big E, big establishment, E. And having said that, and the privilege of working for him, looking back, there were times of frustration and, I wish he would get this done, or I wish we could move this, or I wish that could happen. But one of the legacies that he left us, and I think we should take a minute to really focus on that, was a love for the nobility of public service and what it means to serve one's country. I had the privilege of touring the Bush Library about 2-3 months ago. And I must confess that when I left the library, I had a very odd emotion. I was not anticipating feeling this way. And when I came out of the library, I found myself grieving. And I was really grieving for the last of a generation. And if any of you have the chance to visit presidential libraries, please do it. Just read the quotes on the wall and understand that this president, Herbert Walker Bush, and what he gave us. And I think that to honor his legacy, one of the things that we can do is to sort of honor what he gave us in terms of understanding the nobility of service and the character and the integrity and all of that. And I love our current president and his sort of kick butt, take no prisoners, make stuff happen, get it done kind of demeanor. And we have seen things accomplished in the policy arena in the last year that I only dreamed about in previous service to previous presidents. But my hope is that we can combine the two. My hope is that sitting in this audience or coming out of one of your institutes or classes is the individual that can have both of that sort of love for this country, the character, the integrity, the all of what George Bush, Herbert Walker Bush stood for, combined with the take no prisoners demeanor of Donald Trump, MSH, make stuff happen kind of presidency. And I don't think we have to choose. I don't think we should have to choose. I think we should be able to get both in one person. And hopefully they're coming out of one of your classes right now and getting ready to take on the job. So, having said that, thank you for that point of personal privilege and to be able to express my sincere love and devotion to you and Helen. The Heritage Foundation, who knew? Oh my gosh. Having been around this town for oh so long, the Heritage Foundation to me was the epitome, the height of a think tank, conservative think tank. And I always have to add think tank because I don't want to say Heritage versus Leadership Institute.
No, we're a do tank.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we think about it, you get it done. Okay, got it. A do tank. So, how many Catholics do we have in the room? I have said that Heritage is one of the stations of the cause. That if you're a conservative and in the movement, at some point you must come to that station of the cause. And so I had the privilege of serving first as a guest and speaker at many of their events, and then on the board of Heritage. And then you may or may not know, I actually led the search for the next president. So I guess in some sense I pulled a full Dick Cheney.
Right.
But it was such an interesting process because having developed the profile of what does the next president of the Heritage Foundation, what requisites, knowledge, skills, ability should that person have, then developing the process by which we were going to select that person, to have several members of our board turn and say, oh, dear God, they may be sitting in this room. It could possibly be Kay. So it was one of the most humbling experiences of my life. But it was also, I felt and do feel that I have been called for such a time as this. Quite clearly, the conservative movement in our country is at a watershed. Do you know how many times I've said that in the last 20 years? But what I see going on in our country right now really frightens me a great deal. At Heritage, we do policy. We have analysts and scholars and researchers and writers, and we think. And we try to influence people on Capitol Hill towards good public policy. And we win many battles there. But one of the things that concerns me is that as we're winning those battles, we may be losing the big war. And on my watch, during my lifetime, I have seen this country change so dramatically. And I scratch my head in puzzlement as I try to figure out what is the appeal of socialism to so many young people on college campuses. How did capitalism become a dirty word? What is it that young people don't understand about free markets? Why is it we can't say American exceptionalism anymore? without people totally misunderstanding what it is that we mean. And so a part of my mission at the Heritage Foundation is to not only tackle those kinds of questions that we've done for many years with the policy and with analysis and with producing the backgrounders and the papers and the research, but also to look at some of those larger issues, because if we lose here, we lose here. So we've got to win both. So at the Heritage Foundation right now, my focus is several-fold. One, I have promised to our Board of Trustees and to my dear friend Ed Fulner that a part of what I want to do is to stabilize the ship. I want to take the management skills that I have, and I'm one of those few conservatives that not only loves policy, but I love good management. And I think that's a part of what I learned from this gentleman right here, because he always focused on the rules. And he knew that the process matters. And so I want to make sure that the Heritage Foundation has world-class processes. So I am doing things like looking at our succession planning for every job in the organization to make sure that no matter who gets hit by a bus, the Heritage Foundation will be strong and secure. I want to make sure that we have a long-term strategic plan, and everybody in the building knows the answer to, in 3 years, the Heritage Foundation will fill in the blank. Will what? So we better have a plan, and we better know where we're going. And then I want to make sure that the dollars are following the plan. So I want to make sure that every dollar that we spend at the Heritage Foundation is attached to a goal, is attached to something significant and meaningful. And so we're instituting zero-based budgeting. So everybody's got to come in and justify what they're doing and why. And if it doesn't contribute to mission, it doesn't get done and it doesn't get funded. I mean, my gosh, maybe we should apply conservative values and principles to how we operate in our organizations. What a novel idea. So I'm doing those sorts of things for Ed and Phil. And my word to you, dear friend, is you would be surprised at how much operates within your organization and within this building on the sheer weight of your personality and your presence. And when the founder is no longer there, you have to have the right processes in place to make sure the thing doesn't spin out of control.
Right.
And so a part of what I have pledged to our founder is that I will make sure that the right processes are in place so that the Heritage Foundation will be strong and vibrant for generations to come. So some of my time, energy, and effort is spent there. The other part of that is I need to make sure that the financial resources are there to get that done. And for anybody who heads an organization, you know that a large part of what you do is donor relations and fundraising. Sure. I don't care if I have every policy victory in America happening at Heritage. If I don't raise that budget, I will be issuing the Kay wants to spend more time with her family press release. So a good deal of time and energy is there and done with donor relations. But at the same time, looking down the road and around the corner at what are the big policy issues facing us ahead, and what can we do to establish ourselves to be prepared to take those on. So that's how I spend my days.
Okay. Kay, in your opinion, what are some of the skills you wish conservatives had developed to a higher degree of effectiveness?
Wow, that's a great question, and I started to answer it a little bit just now. We care deeply about policy, and we want to see good policy enacted. But I'm telling every conservative young person that I know that hopes to run for office, that hopes to serve as a political appointee, that hopes to influence policy, whether it's in the media or somewhere else, that there are certain skills that we all need to have. I am so grateful for the opportunity that I had to learn financial skills and budgeting. Do you know what it was like taking over as an assistant secretary at HHS years ago under Herbert Walker Bush? And this is an absolutely true story. You can't make this stuff up. Someone came in, and it was a combined effort by certain agencies to put on a conference. And this conference was going to cost $34 million. And so I said, and typically the way the bureaucracy works, it came in on a Friday afternoon, 4:30, and said, we need your signature on this by COB today. And, I had to say, my signature's like not for sale. And the president sent me over here to head, this department to look at things on his behalf. So I'm going to need over the weekend to read this. And it was like, you're not supposed to read it. You're just supposed to sign it. But the ability to dive deep and to actually look at the numbers. And I came in on Monday and says, I want to call a meeting. And they said, can we have 2 weeks to discuss this contract? I said, because you're going to have to explain to me how you're going to spend $34 million on a conference. And it was like a 5-year plan, and they were going to do regional things around. And after 5 years, it was going to culminate in this big scientific conference. Just by asking the questions and saying, I want to know what this means on this particular line, I don't understand this number, what that means, it dropped by $11 million by the time the meeting happened. Ah. So you got to know how to read budgets. You have to know processes and how they work. Get your hands immediately on procurement. When I was serving George Allen, there was this pot of money that came down from the federal government, and the governor and I were so excited about how we were going to open it up and make sure that conservative organizations had an opportunity to compete for these resources. And we met and laid out the process. And I went back over to my office and I called, the commissioner and several other people in, and they came into my office chagrined and said, oh, we've already let that money out. We've already distributed it. And it went to the same people with the same processes. And so, it is important to know how the systems work as well as to be grounded in good policy. And the final two things is you have to be able to speak well and write well, because you've got to be able to stand up and convince people of your perspective and what you know and that you're right. And dear Lord, can we please start graduating people from colleges that can write emails and not just text messages? Okay.
Okay. That's great. That's great. One of the things I teach my graduates is that you must read to lead. And I recommend books. And I'm curious, what book have you gifted to the most people?
Wow. Okay, this may come as a complete surprise. Have I get the honest answer to that? The Bible. I have gifted that more than anything. When I was dean of the School of Government at Region, of course, I gave one to every graduate, and I love to give them as confirmation gifts. And so, yeah, how do you live in this town? Indeed, how do you live in the world without a guide like that for your life? So that may seem like an easy answer, but it is in fact the truth.
That's what we were looking for.
Well, that's the truth.
I have to say I'm not surprised.
Now, second to that, it may surprise you, there are two books that I give side by side. And if you want to understand Kay James and her style of management, I really do like the book, The Paradox of Choice. And what's that other Malcolm Gladwell book? Tipping Point. You got to read those two together, because it occurred to me that I really wanted to know how to make policy tip. I wanted to know how, if I really wanted to take an idea and make it mainstream, how do you do that? And so almost anyone who's ever come to work for me has had to read those two books and read them together. And then The Paradox of Choice, because that book talks about how people make decisions. And it's not at all like we think they do. So if you want to know how to influence people and how they make decisions, how they will change, I recommend reading The Tipping Point and then read The Paradox of Choice.
That's an interesting answer. Back in '81, when I went to work at the Reagan White House, I was greatly smitten by a book by Thomas Sowell called Knowledge and Decisions, which is a study about acquisition of knowledge and how much knowledge do you need to acquire before you can make the most reasonable decision. It was the book hardback was $20, and I bought 10 of them, and I bought them to distribute around as to Reaganites in the Reagan administration, the idea of lending them out, and they would give it back, and I would get it back. So at the end of my 3 years at the Reagan White House, I had 3 of the books. So I had 7 of them had been lent out and never came back. But I agree that people do not understand how competently decisions have to be made.
And I would add, you noticed it wasn't a policy book or a history book or anything like that, and that's because we as conservatives do that very well anyway.
Right.
And there are several axioms that this young man right here from Heritage, he's actually the brains behind all of this, could quote to you chapter and verse, and that is, if you want to work on Team K, you must be prepared to eat problems for breakfast. I mean, if you got to be the type of person that when you get the phone call, oh, we have a problem, you get excited. It's like, gee, okay, let's fix it. What's the problem? I mean, that's what I get up for in the morning, is to fix problems. And if you don't enjoy fixing problems, then you are not prepared to be on Team K. And, you know, the first time I had someone come down the hall who worked for me and say, oh, my gosh, you won't believe. I mean, I found myself having to cheer him up. And I said, no, see, you're the staff guy. You're supposed to come to me and say, we got a problem and I got an answer. And that's how this works. Because if you come to me without an answer, one of us is unnecessary, and it's not me. So if I have to tell you what to do because you don't know what to do, I hired you because I thought you were the best and brightest in your field. Don't come tell me, oh my gosh, there's a story in the paper this morning. What do you think we ought to do? You're supposed to be the best dadgum communications person on the planet. So you're supposed to come to me. If I have to tell you what to do, one of us is unnecessary. And it's not me. And the other thing is, I always look for people who enjoy making decisions to be on Team K. I mean, actually enjoy. Do you know some people get paralyzed with having to make decisions? They'll get to a stoplight and go, oh, I should pray. Which way, Lord? Do I turn left or do I turn right? I don't know what to do. And they get all, frustrated and upset and so I think the skill set that we need is, how do you take a mass of information, distill it, and be able to make good decisions. And you have to be able to make good decisions and feel confident in that, because in the jobs that I've had to do, many days you've had to make multi-million-dollar decisions and then move on to the next. And during 9/11, many of the decisions that I made, I knew people's really, truly, their lives depended on the decision, not figuratively, but literally. If I made the wrong decisions, people's lives could be lost. So you've got to not be afraid to make decisions. And in many cases, you have to make them quickly. Because if you can't make them quickly, by the time you finally get around to making the decision, the moment has passed. The decision was made based on timing and not on good judgment. So the ability to distill information, do the analysis, make a decision, and move on. So.
All right. Kay, what advice would you give to someone who is determined newly that they want to get started in the conservative movement?
Sit down and listen. It is amazing to me the number of young people that I run into, and I particularly saw this when I was the dean at the School of Government at Regent. Every year, there were at least 6 people who were determined that God had told them they were going to be president of the United States. Every intern that knows their calling is to be the president of the Heritage Foundation. And they know exactly what to do and how to do it. And for every young person here, Morton is not like old enough to be considered a father figure, so we just go in with older brother. How about that?
Yeah, well,
okay.
So
my point,
Grandpa comes to mind. Go ahead.
My point is that there was a time when you really respected the wisdom and the judgment and the knowledge of those individuals who came before you. I can tell you that I spent 25 years thinking through, making mistakes, recuperating from those mistakes, learning, gaining knowledge and wisdom about how to take the conservative message into the African American community. And it grieves me to see some of the young folks coming along now making mistakes that I made 25 years ago.
Yeah, that's hurtful.
And all they got to do is say, could I have lunch with you? At least to learn what you did, how you did, why you did it. And so I think that I am always challenged by the youth, by the vitality, by the new ideas. But one of the things that we need to learn in the conservative movement is how to work intergenerationally, how to glean from that. It grieves me to, I see them doing stuff and I go, that's not going to work. And let me tell you why. And they could take that and we could be this much further along, but eventually they'll get there. And I have had to learn just to sit back and let it happen. And that a part of that comes from being a mom and raising kids. And sometimes you just got to let them make their own mistakes and do things and see things, and they'll eventually get there. But it's just wasted time. It's just wasted time. We could move this movement further along. So for all of you who have the opportunity on a daily basis to learn from an icon in the movement, take advantage of it. Ask Morton questions. Ask him how he did things. Ask him why he did things the way he did. Ask, quiet as it's kept, more. We're not going to be here that much longer. You know that, right? I mean, it is what it is. It is what it is. So when you ask me what is the advice I would give to the young conservative today, it is listen, ask questions, and then take that with your vitality, with your new ideas, with your new technology, and take it to a whole new step, because you guys are going to take this movement in places that we couldn't even have dreamed of. You really are. But you don't know it all. I'm just saying.
Look, Kay, what encouragement would you give to a discouraged conservative who has concluded after some defeat that we are losing?
You can't have been at this very long. Anybody in the room know the name Doug Johnson? Anybody know who Doug Johnson is? Doug Johnson was, for many years, voted as the most effective conservative pro-life lobbyist. He was the lobbyist for the National Right to Life for many years. And when I first came to Washington and I was the spokesperson for the National Right to Life, I remember one particular defeat that we had, and I was just devastated. Devastated. I mean, the little tears were rolling down my face, and it was the end of the world. And we were at the office. I was watching the vote on C-SPAN. We were in the office, and Doug sort of turned from the TV and went back in his office and went back to work. And he told me then, he said one of the things that he had learned about working in this town is to never get too down with the defeats nor too high with the victories. And that we were in this for the long haul.
Absolutely.
And, I would share with you the story of the James family going to the beach. And back in the day when we were so extremely poor, we could not get the air condition fixed in the station wagon, the one with the wood on the side. I mean, this is pre-vans. I mean, real, like, station wagon. A Woody, yeah. With the seats.
I had a 1949 Plymouth Woody, and we made the mistake of parking it behind the barn next to a fence post, and termites came up the fence post and ate away a good portion
of the
the
wood.
side of my station wagon. True story.
And he's still bitter about it. Well, we're sitting in the car and we're pulling out of the driveway, and it's one of those things where, you put the kids in the car and then you pack around them because you got to take all the stuff to the beach because you can't afford to buy anything once you get there. And the first question out of the back seat was, how long till we get there? I mean, we're not out of the driveway yet.
And that was the second question and the third question.
And the fourth. Absolutely. And I will never forget Charles, who is a saint. I mean, after all, he is married to me. Turned around and through his teeth said, "Do you want to go to the beach?" And they said, "Yes." He said, "Then what difference does it make how long it takes to get there?" So to conservatives, I say, do you want America, an America that is prosperous and free and safe? Then what difference does it make how long it takes to get there? We are never, ever, ever going to stop fighting for this country, ever. And so discouragement is not an option.
Great. What an inspiration you are. And you can see, those of you who don't know Kay and haven't spent much time with her, you can see why she has performed in so many important roles in advancing conservative principles. Kay, thank you very much. Let's give her a great